Bob Connor was a hard worker. A heavy equipment mechanic, he spent long hours on the job to ensure his family, his wife, Lisa, and their 3 kids, Tammy, Josh, and Terry, had everything they needed. Their life in a small frame house, with its big mortgage and chaotic routine, felt like the American dream. When Lisa announced her upcoming 3-day trip with her sisters to Lake Winona, Bob didn't think much of it. These trips had become a tradition for Lisa and her family, a few days of hiking, swimming, and campfire fun. He initially planned to stay home, busy with work, but a rare schedule change left him with unexpected time off. "Good news, Lisa," Bob said one evening as Lisa stirred a pot of pasta. "I'm off work next week, so I'll be able to join you and the kids at the lake." Lisa froze for a split second before flashing a bright smile. "That's great, Bob. The kids will love having you there. You'll have some fun too." Bob nodded. "If it's okay, I'll bring the dirt bike along. I've been wanting to hit the trails up there. Shouldn't take up too much family time." Lisa's ponytail, a small practical knot she always wore when doing chores, bobbed as she nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, enjoy yourself," she replied, her smile a little too eager. That night, as Bob rummaged through a closet for his trail maps, he noticed Lisa quickly closing her laptop. She smiled at him, kissed his cheek, and left the room, but Bob couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Curiosity got the better of him. As Lisa headed downstairs, Bob reopened her laptop and checked her emails. At first, there was nothing unusual. Lisa was meticulous about deleting messages. But this time, in a rush, she had forgotten to clear her deleted folder. Bob found a message sent to someone named Don Thompson. "Change in plans," it read. "Bob will be coming up with the family. You can still come, but I'll have Karen put you in the last cabin. We'll have time together while he's on his motorcycle." Bob's heart sank as he reread the email. He vaguely remembered Don Thompson from Lisa's high school yearbook, a tall, athletic guy she had dated before they met. Why was he coming to their family vacation? Why was Lisa arranging to meet him? At Lake Winona, Bob's suspicions grew. The family arrived at the cabins, and he noticed a dark green Dodge Durango parked by the last one. Over lunch, Bob announced he was going for a ride and took his dirt bike deep into the trails. But instead of exploring, he idled the bike, parked it, and quietly returned on foot. Back at the campground, Bob observed from a distance. Lisa and her sisters sat at a picnic table chatting while the kids played. Soon, a man emerged from the last cabin, the driver of the Durango. Tall and confident, he strolled up to the group, exchanging warm greetings with everyone. Bob's chest tightened as he watched Lisa smile at the man in a way she hadn't smiled at him in years. Moments later, Bob saw Lisa and the man, Don Thompson, walk toward the bathhouse. They entered separately, Lisa glancing over her shoulder as if to ensure no one was watching. Bob crept closer, his heart pounding. He pulled out his video camera, not to record but to capture audio. As he pressed his ear to the thin wall, their voices confirmed his worst fears. "I'm really sorry, Don," Lisa said softly. "I had no idea Bob would be coming." "It's okay," Don replied. "I'm just happy to see you. Tonight, let's sneak down to the lake after the sing-along. Like old times." Lisa giggled. "You silly boy. I think I can keep you happy until then." What followed shattered Bob. The unmistakable sounds of an intimate act left no doubt in his mind. He stayed rooted to the spot, tears stinging his eyes. When the pair finally left, Bob sat in silence, overwhelmed by heartbreak and anger. For 12 years, he had thought his marriage was rock solid. Now he realized he had been living a lie. Bob returned to the cabin just as Lisa and Dawn rejoined the group at the picnic table. His mind raced as he watched her laugh and chat with her sisters, as if nothing had happened. How could she smile so effortlessly, knowing what she had just done? "Hey, Dad," Tammy called out, waving him over. "You're back early. Did you ride far?" Bob forced a smile, his stomach churning. Just scouted a couple of trails, he replied, ruffling her hair. Lisa glanced up from her conversation, her small ponytail swaying as she turned. Back so soon? I thought you'd be gone longer, she said casually, her voice betraying none of the guilt Bob had expected. I figured I'd spend some time with the family, Bob said, his tone neutral. It's not every day we all get away together. Lisa nodded, her expression unreadable. But as she poured herself another glass of lemonade, Bob caught her exchanging a fleeting glance with Don. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. That evening, the campground hosted its traditional sing-along by the fire pit. Families gathered under the stars, singing old favorites and roasting marshmallows. Bob sat with Tammy and Josh, pretending to enjoy the music, while Lisa sat a few feet away, chatting with her sisters. As the group sang "This Land Is Your Land," Bob noticed Lisa slipping away from the fire. She muttered something to her sister and disappeared into the darkness. Moments later, Don followed. Bob's pulse quickened. He waited a minute before excusing himself, telling the kids he needed to grab something from the cabin. He walked briskly toward the lake, the path lit only by moonlight. When he reached the dock, he saw them. Lisa and Don stood close together, their voices low and intimate. Bob crept closer, staying hidden among the trees. I've missed you so much, Don said, his hand brushing Lisa's cheek. Lisa sighed, leaning into his touch. I know. This weekend was supposed to be our chance, but now. Bob clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. He stepped out of the shadows, his voice cutting through the still night. But now what, Lisa? Lisa jumped, her eyes wide with shock. Bob, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, Bob said, his voice cold. Sneaking off with Don while your husband and kids sit around the campfire? Real classy. Don took a step forward, his hands raised defensively. Look, Bob, this isn't what it looks like. Shut up, Bob snapped, his glare fixed on Lisa. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to her. Lisa stammered, her face pale. Bob, please, let me explain. Explain what? Bob demanded, his voice rising. How you lied to me. How you brought him here, to our family vacation. How you've been sneaking around behind my back. Tears filled Lisa's eyes as she tried to speak, but Bob didn't let her. I trusted you, Lisa. For 12 years, I thought we had something real. But now I see what a fool I've been. Don opened his mouth to speak again, but Bob silenced him with a look. You need to leave. Now. Pack your things and get out of this campground before I call the sheriff. Bob, don't do this, Lisa pleaded. I'm done, Bob said firmly. If you want to ruin your life, that's on you. But you're not dragging me or the kids down with you. Back at the cabin, Bob packed his bag in silence. Tammy peeked out from her bunk, her brow furrowed with concern. Dad? Is everything okay? Bob forced a smile. Just some grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Don't worry about it. As he loaded the car, Lisa returned to the cabin, her face streaked with tears. Bob, please, let's talk about this, she begged. There's nothing to talk about, Bob said, his voice steady. You made your choice, Lisa. Now I'm making mine. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, leaving Lisa standing in the driveway, her ponytail illuminated by the porch light. As the car pulled away, Tammy looked back through the rear window. Where's Mom? She asked quietly. She'll catch up later, Bob replied, gripping the wheel tightly. Right now, it's just us. The drive home was silent except for the hum of the car engine. Tammy and Josh, seated in the back, whispered occasionally but mostly stared out the windows, sensing the tension radiating from their father. Terry, too young to grasp the gravity of the situation, dozed off in his car seat. Bob's grip on the wheel was tight, his mind churning. He replayed the events at the lake over and over, wondering how long Lisa's betrayal had been unfolding and how he had missed the signs. The memory of her ponytail bobbing as she smiled at Dawn, oblivious to the wreckage she was causing, replayed like a taunt. As they pulled into the driveway, Tammy broke the silence. "Dad, is Mom okay? Why didn't she come with us?" Bob hesitated before answering. "Mom needed some time to think," he said, keeping his tone even. "Let's go inside. I'll make dinner." Tammy didn't look convinced, but nodded, gathering her brothers and leading them inside. Once the kids were settled, Bob sat at the kitchen table, his phone in hand. He didn't want to make this call, but he knew it was necessary. His brother, Jack, had always been the practical one, the voice of reason in tough situations. "Jack," Bob said when his brother answered, "I need your advice." "It's bad." "What's going on?" Jack asked, his tone immediately serious. Bob explained everything, the email, the confrontation, the discovery at the lake. By the time he finished, his voice was hoarse. Jack was silent for a moment before responding. "First things first, you need to protect yourself and the kids. If Lisa's been sneaking around, there's no telling what else she's been hiding. Talk to a lawyer. Get your finances in order. And make sure you have proof of what you saw. You'll need it if this goes to court." Bob nodded, his resolve strengthening. "Thanks, Jack. I'll handle it." The next day, Lisa called. Bob let it ring, watching her name flash on the screen before silencing it. She left a voicemail, her voice trembling with emotion. "Bob, please, I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Please call me back. I need to see the kids. They need their mother." Bob played the message twice before deleting it. He wasn't ready to hear her excuses. In the days that followed, Bob made good on Jack's advice. He contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation and sharing the evidence he had collected. The lawyer, a sharp and efficient woman named Claire, assured him they had a strong case for custody if it came to that. "You've been the stable parent," Claire said. "If Lisa's actions jeopardize the well-being of the kids, that will work in your favor. But tread carefully. Judges don't like to see parents weaponizing their children." Bob nodded, absorbing her words. "I just want what's best for them," he said. Meanwhile, Lisa made multiple attempts to reach out, sending texts and emails that ranged from apologetic to defensive. "You're overreacting," one message read. "It was one mistake. We can work through this." But Bob couldn't forget what he'd seen, or heard, at the lake. The trust he had built over 12 years was gone, replaced by a deep sense of betrayal. When Lisa finally showed up unannounced one evening, Bob opened the door but didn't invite her in. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. "We'll talk," Bob replied, his tone cold. "But not tonight. The kids are inside, and they don't need to see this." "Bob, please," Lisa pleaded. "I love you. I love our family. I made a mistake, but we can fix this." Bob shook his head. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. What you did, planning a weekend with him while pretending it was about family, that's not a mistake. That's a choice." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but Bob didn't waver. "If you want to talk, do it through my lawyer," he said before closing the door. Inside, Tammy watched from the stairs, her face pale. "Dad, is Mom not coming back?" Bob sat down beside her, pulling her into a hug. "I don't know, sweetheart. But no matter what happens, I'm here for you. We're going to get through this together." Bob knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but his focus was clear, protecting his kids and giving them the stability they deserved. He met with Claire, his lawyer, to discuss next steps. She had reviewed the evidence, Lisa's email, the recordings from the lake, and her erratic attempts to reconcile. "We'll file for temporary custody first," Claire explained. "This will keep the kids with you while the court reviews the situation. Given what we have, the judge is likely to side with you, at least in the short term." Bob nodded. "I just want to keep them out of this mess as much as possible. They've already been through enough." Claire gave him a reassuring look. That's what we're working toward. But you need to prepare for Lisa to fight back. She'll have her side of the story, and it's not uncommon for people in her position to get desperate. Bob sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I'll do whatever it takes. Meanwhile, Lisa was scrambling to regain control of the narrative. She contacted a lawyer of her own, a polished man named Vincent who specialized in family law. You need to position yourself as the dedicated mother, Vincent advised her during their first meeting. Minimize the affair, it was a moment of weakness, not a reflection of your parenting. Focus on your role in the kids' lives. Lisa nodded, though guilt gnawed at her. She had been so consumed by her own desires that she hadn't thought about the consequences for Tammy, Josh, or Terry. Now, the reality of potentially losing them was hitting her hard. She sent another text to Bob that evening. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please let me see the kids. Bob didn't reply. Tammy had always been the observant one. At 12 years old, she was mature beyond her years, and the tension between her parents didn't escape her notice. She overheard hushed phone calls and saw the way her dad's jaw clenched whenever her mom's name came up. One evening, she confronted him. Dad, why won't you talk to Mom? She keeps texting me, asking when she can visit. Bob hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Your mom and I are going through some things right now, Tammy. It's not your job to fix it, okay? Just focus on being a kid. But I miss her, Tammy said softly. Bob's heart ached at her words, but he held firm. I know you do, sweetheart. And you'll see her soon. But right now, I need to make sure everything is safe and fair for you and your brothers. Josh, on the other hand, was more vocal about his feelings. Why can't Mom just come back? He demanded one night as Bob tucked him in. She messed up, but she's still our mom. I know this is hard, buddy, Bob said, sitting on the edge of the bed. But sometimes adults make choices that have big consequences. Your mom loves you, and so do I. We're just figuring things out. Josh frowned. You're not going to leave too, are you? Never, Bob said firmly, ruffling his son's hair. I'll always be here for you. The first hearing took place 2 weeks later. Bob and Lisa sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, avoiding eye contact as their lawyers presented their arguments. Claire emphasized Bob's consistent role as the primary caregiver since the separation and pointed to Lisa's affair as evidence of poor judgment. Vincent countered by painting Lisa as a loving mother who had made a mistake but remained deeply committed to her children. No parent is perfect, he argued. But Miss Connor has always been there for her kids, and she deserves the chance to continue that role. The judge listened carefully, her expression neutral. At the end of the hearing, she granted Bob temporary custody but allowed Lisa supervised visitation twice a week. Outside the courtroom, Lisa approached Bob. Thank you for not blocking me completely, she said quietly. This isn't about punishing you, Lisa, Bob replied, his voice calm but firm. It's about doing what's best for the kids. That weekend, Lisa had her first supervised visit at a nearby park. Tammy and Josh were excited to see her, running to hug her the moment she arrived. Terry clung to Bob's leg, unsure of what was happening. Lisa knelt down, her ponytail bouncing as she smiled at her youngest. Hi, Terry. It's me, Mommy. Terry hid his face against Bob's knee. Why did you leave? He asked softly. Lisa's smile faltered, but she kept her tone gentle. I made a mistake, sweetie. But I'm here now, and I love you very much. Bob watched from a distance, his emotions a mix of sadness and resolve. He wanted his kids to have a relationship with their mother, but he wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Lisa's supervised visits continued over the following weeks, each one a mix of joy and awkwardness. Tammy and Josh were quick to reconnect with their mother, their excitement bubbling over as they recounted stories from school and showed her their drawings. But Terry remained distant, clinging to Bob whenever Lisa approached. It's just going to take time, the case supervisor assured her after one visit. You've been away, and young kids don't understand the nuances of adult relationships. Be patient. Lisa nodded, but the guilt weighed heavily on her. She had made her choices, and now her family was paying the price. At home, Bob focused on creating a sense of normalcy for the kids. He packed their lunches, helped with homework, and cheered at Tammy's soccer games. But behind the scenes, he was preparing for the next step, filing for permanent custody. Claire met with him one evening, spreading legal documents across the dining table. "We need to frame this in a way that shows the court you're prioritizing the kid's stability," she said. "The affair is relevant, but the focus should be on what you've done to provide a secure environment since the separation." Bob nodded, reviewing the documents. "What about Lisa? Does she have a chance at joint custody?" Claire hesitated. "She might. Courts often favor shared parenting unless there's clear evidence that one parent is unfit. But given the circumstances, I believe we have a strong case to keep primary custody with you." Bob exhaled deeply. "Let's move forward." Determined to prove her commitment to her family, Lisa started therapy at the recommendation of her lawyer. The sessions were uncomfortable at first, forcing her to confront the choices that had led to her current situation. "You've talked about guilt and regret," her therapist said one afternoon. "But what about accountability? What steps are you taking to repair the damage?" Lisa frowned, her ponytail swaying as she shifted uncomfortably. "I've been trying to reconnect with my kids. I've apologized to Bob, but he won't even listen." "Apologies are important, but actions matter more," the therapist replied. "Rebuilding trust takes consistency. Keep showing up for your kids. Keep proving you're willing to put in the work." Lisa left the session with a renewed sense of purpose. She began volunteering at Tammy's school and made an effort to attend Josh's baseball practices. Though the supervised visits felt stifling, she used every moment to bond with her children. For Tammy, the separation had been the hardest. She adored her mother and hated seeing her relegated to supervised visits. One evening, as Bob helped her with a science project, she worked up the courage to speak. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever come back?" Tammy asked, her voice tentative. Bob paused, setting down the glue gun. "I don't know, sweetheart. That's something your mom and I are still figuring out." "But she's trying," Tammy said. "I see her at school, and she asks about my games. Doesn't that count for something?" Bob looked at his daughter, his heart heavy. "It does count, Tammy. But sometimes, it's not just about trying. It's about rebuilding trust. That takes time." Josh, on the other hand, was more optimistic. During one visit, he pulled Lisa aside and whispered, "You're going to come home soon, right? Dad just needs to stop being mad." Lisa smiled weakly, hugging him. "I hope so, Josh. But no matter what happens, I'll always love you." Terry, still unsure, often stayed glued to Bob's side during visits. One afternoon, as Lisa sat drawing pictures with Tammy and Josh, Terry tugged on Bob's shirt. "Is Mommy staying this time?" Terry asked quietly. "No, buddy," Bob replied, kneeling to meet his son's gaze. "But she'll come back for another visit. She loves you very much." Terry frowned. "Then why did she leave?" Bob sighed, struggling to find the right words. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you." Months later, the family gathered in court again, this time to determine permanent custody. Bob presented his case, supported by testimonies from teachers, the case supervisor, and even Jack. Lisa's lawyer argued for joint custody, emphasizing her efforts to reconnect and her commitment to therapy. When the judge delivered her decision, the room fell silent. "Primary custody will remain with Mr. Connor," she ruled. "Ms. Connor will have visitation rights, including overnight stays, contingent upon the continuation of her supervised visits for another 6 months. The court strongly encourages both parties to prioritize the well-being of their children and work toward cooperative co-parenting." As they left the courthouse, Lisa approached Bob. "Thank you for not shutting me out completely," she said, her voice subdued. "I did this for the kids," Bob replied. "But if you're serious about changing, prove it to them." "Not to me." Lisa nodded, her ponytail swaying as she walked toward her car. In the months following the custody hearing, life for the Connor family settled into a tentative rhythm. Bob maintained full custody of the kids, but Lisa's supervised visits gradually became more relaxed as she proved her commitment to change. Tammy and Josh quickly adapted to the new arrangement, excited to spend weekends with their mom. Tammy, ever the peacemaker, made it her mission to keep the family connected. She often brought homemade cards to her mom's house or suggested activities they could all enjoy. "You should come to my next soccer game, Mom," Tammy said one Friday evening. "Dad doesn't mind if you sit in the stands." Lisa smiled, her heart swelling. "I'd love that, sweetie." Terry remained cautious, staying close to Bob during visits and rarely engaging with Lisa directly. But one evening, as Lisa sat coloring with Tammy and Josh, Terry surprised everyone by crawling into her lap. "Can you draw a dinosaur?" he asked quietly. Lisa blinked back tears, nodding as she picked up a green crayon. "Of course, sweetheart. What kind of dinosaur do you want?" Terry didn't respond, but he stayed in her lap, watching intently as she drew. It was a small moment, but for Lisa, it felt monumental. For Bob, life had taken on a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. With the burden of mistrust lifted, he focused on his work, his kids, and his own well-being. He joined a local hiking club, finding solace in the quiet of nature and the camaraderie of others who shared his interests. One afternoon, during a group hike, Bob struck up a conversation with a woman named Amanda. She was practical and kind, with an easygoing demeanor that put him at ease. "You hike these trails often?" Amanda asked, adjusting her backpack. "First time," Bob admitted with a smile. "Figured I'd try something new." Amanda grinned. "Well, you're off to a good start. These are some of the best trails around." The two walked together, sharing stories about their lives. Bob found himself laughing more than he had in months. Lisa continued therapy, working through the choices that had led to her mistakes. Her therapist encouraged her to focus on rebuilding trust, not just with her kids, but with herself. "You've come a long way," the therapist said during one session. "But the real work is staying consistent. Trust isn't built overnight." Lisa nodded, determined to keep showing up for her children. She took a job at a local bookstore, enjoying the steady routine and the chance to connect with her community. One Saturday, as she read a storybook to Terry during a visit, he leaned against her shoulder. "I like it when you read to me, Mommy," he said softly. Lisa's heart swelled. "I like it too, Terry. We can do this every time I see you." Months turned into a year, and the Connor family found their footing. Tammy excelled in soccer, with both her parents cheering her on from opposite sides of the field. Josh discovered a love for art, often sharing his sketches with both Bob and Lisa. And Terry, once hesitant, began looking forward to his weekends with his mom. Bob and Lisa maintained a cordial relationship, focusing on co-parenting rather than revisiting the pain of their past. They attended school events together, exchanged updates about the kids, and kept their interactions respectful. One evening, as Tammy prepared for her middle school graduation, she called both her parents into the living room. "Can we take a picture?" "All of us together?" she asked, holding up her phone. Bob and Lisa exchanged a glance before nodding. They stood on either side of Tammy, with Josh and Terry squeezed in between. "Smile," Tammy said, snapping the photo. Later that night, Bob looked at the picture on Tammy's phone. It wasn't perfect, but it captured something he hadn't expected, a family, fractured but still standing. For Bob, it was a reminder that while life didn't always go as planned, it could still move forward, and sometimes that was enough.